It's an issue that's been plaguing the State Textbook Committee for some time now, the deletion of several home economic books from the committee's textbook recommendation list. A member of the committee told reporters today the books emphasized radical lifestyle.
Now, I'm just saying it might be a misplaced emphasis. If the public schools are going to go into life adjustment and sexuality and death education and everything, first they need to get their act together on the academic.
And the controversy resurfaced again today at the State Board of Education meeting when the textbook list came up for a vote. But before the vote came much discussion.
The purpose of school, of the classroom, is not only to teach our children basic facts that can be memorized, but also, and we believe more importantly, how to think, how to question, how to reason, how to analyze, so that children can learn to make their own decisions.
However, the board members sided with the State Textbook Committee, voting 7-1 to adopt the new list. But this meeting raised several questions about the process of textbook selections, such as whether the Textbook Committee should be required to hold their meetings publicly. Board members agreed such questions have to be considered, but they had no answers today. Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News.
Educational clubs of Robert E. Lee.
A083. And when the carol
Decorations that patients have put together to symbolize the spirit of Christmas. So I now declare this tree officially dedicated. Miss Betty, any comments?
You did
Thank
very
you.
well, thank you. That's fine.
The jury of 9 men and 3 women returned to the federal courthouse at 8:30 this morning. They'd been unable to reach a verdict after 3 hours of deliberations late yesterday. It took nearly 2 more hours this morning before the verdicts were announced. Roman Casey of Andalusia was found guilty on count 1 of the 23-count indictment. That count alleges Casey, along with co-defendants D.C. Henderson and William Mansell, took part in a scheme to defraud these businesses in the Wiregrass and Mississippi. Authorities allege the men set up a phony food systems business and received $75,000 in merchandise. But the jury acquitted Henderson on all counts. Defense attorneys had argued the Florala man was a victim rather than a participant in the scheme. Only yesterday, charges against the third defendant, William Mansell of Andalusia, were dismissed by federal judge Robert Varner for a lack of evidence. Casey remains free on bond tonight. A sentencing date has not been set. Cal Calloway, WSFA TV News, Dothan.
field, and they finally break the ice.
The Mideast Regionals, March 26, 1983. Knoxville, Tennessee is the site of the first Louisville, Kentucky game since the Mideast Regionals in Evanston, Illinois, 1959. For the record, Louisville wins 80-68 in overtime. That game prompts Kentucky to finally schedule the Cardinals on a home-and-home regular season basis. Last season is a special bonus for area basketball fans. The Wildcats and Cardinals play twice, both times in Rupp Arena. Kentucky wins both times, including a 72-67 win in the Mideast Regionals in Lexington. This Saturday marks the first time Kentucky plays the Cardinals right here in Louisville since January 17, 1922. This game could be a close one because of the Cardinal injuries and the Wildcat inexperience. So Freedom Hall just might be the edge the Cardinals need for victory.
This year will be a lot different because of the situation of us playing at home. We'll be psyched up for the game in that we will have the crowd behind us, unlike back in Lexington. We're looking forward to it.
19,000 people pulling for you is a big difference instead of, say 20,000 against you. And, it gets you pumped up.
If it's worth a half a point, we'll take that. If it's worth 3 or 4, we'll take that. Whatever it's worth, we hope that it turns out that way.
Kentucky holds the series edge 11 games to 4. In Louisville, I'm Barry Katz reporting for NBC News.
Schedule BE-2. Computations or recommendations or conclusions in my testimony. I assume I will be. Haven't been yet. My 14th or 15th case, roughly speaking.
Responses to the discovery requests.
Ultimately, yes.
In general, for the purposes of providing testimony indicated.
A report conducted for the Department of Defense shows there are 7 waste disposal sites that Maxwell Air Force Base has used over the years. The study was the first phase of an Air Force-wide program to identify waste sites used by bases. Phase 2 of the program is underway at Maxwell, and officials hope by drilling monitoring wells they can determine what, if any, effect the waste buried in the landfills will have on the environment. Air Force officials say the majority of the waste buried in landfills is non-hazardous garbage, but there are also some toxic chemicals stored there.
In the past, they've put some paint sludges and solvent sludges in these landfills, and there's always the possibility that the containers they use may start leaking and it may get into the groundwater.
While the groundwater near the waste sites is not used by the public, officials say there is a possibility it could reach other underground water sites and flow into the Alabama River. The final report on the samples taken here won't be back until September or October. If contamination is found, the Air Force will then start phase 3 and 4, which identifies the problem and then does something about it. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
We would rather stay pretty much away from it if we can right now, due to the fact that family has suffered a lot of trauma due to this incident. We can tell you that it was a mother-daughter type thing, and it occurred in southeast Montgomery, as I say, in a residential neighborhood, and it also fits the exact same MO as several in southwestern Georgia.
Bills, bills, and more bills. They add up pretty quickly, and before you know it, you owe hundreds of dollars. Now, there's no problem if you can make those payments, but so much of the time we overextend ourselves and put off paying or don't pay at all, and that can ruin a credit rating. To get help before it's too late, you can turn to Consumer Credit Counseling.
We try to show them the advantage of living on a budget so that they will not have credit problems. This is one field we want to be in, educating the people to avoid a credit problem before it happens. Unfortunately, there are so many that have already let that happen. They're already overextended. And then we try to make an agreement with their creditors and pay them on a partial payment basis so that they won't have to go bankrupt. The majority of the ones we're getting now are pretty well overextended. If they owe, say, 2 or 3 credit card accounts, furniture bills, a couple of cars, and some medical expense, their credit payments might add up to $500 or $600 a month. So it would take a pretty good salary to pay that, plus all the routine living expenses. And they're the ones we try to help the most. We try to get them to reduce their living expense, live on as little as possible so that they can pay every creditor.
So when you're out shopping this holiday season, think about your financial shape just a couple of months down the road when all those bills start coming in. If you can't afford to pay for things now, adding up more on your charge accounts will just make matters worse.
A dioxin is any of a family of compounds. The Environmental Protection Agency considers TCDD the dioxin of greatest concern. That's the type discovered after elaborate tests were run on samples taken from PCB storage tanks at ML. State officials say 5 tanks were tested. In 3 tanks, no dioxin showed up. In 1, 13 parts per billion was detected. And in a 5th tank with a capacity of 500,000 gallons, 52 parts per billion was discovered.
The sample that contained 52 parts per billion would be considered a high concentration. Now the others concentrations would be low, extremely low.
Broadwater says the EPA will assist the state in dealing with this unexpected problem. The federal government will have complete control over the disposal of the dioxin, while the State Department of Environmental Management will try to determine where the dioxin came from and how it got to ML.
It will be a very intensive investigation.
Broadwater says chemical waste management officials were just as surprised as state officials when the dioxin was found, and he says they're cooperating fully with the investigation. Broadwater stresses there is no danger to the public, even though exposure to dioxin has been linked with skin rashes, birth defects, and cancer.
As long as it stays right there in those tanks, there's no threat.
Once investigators find out where the dioxin originated, the question will be, did it wind up at the ML plant accidentally or intentionally?
Any generator, any transporter, or any handler of hazardous waste is aware of the fact that to do this intentionally is a criminal violation.
Lynn Sampson, WSFA TV News.
To explain why you're in such a trouble. Naturally collect. We try to show them the advantage of living on a budget so that they will not have credit problems. This is one field we want to be in, educating the people to avoid a credit problem before it happens. Unfortunately, there are so many that have already let that happen. They're already overextended. And then we try to make an agreement with their creditors and pay them on a partial payment basis.
This is the snow that covers the town. This is the book from which carols are sung.
The prison system essentially offers two forms of education: a basic adult education designed for inmates with elementary school level abilities, and vocational education designed to teach an inmate a skill he or she might use later to get a job. But the Vocational Education Study Committee says the prison system education program is chaotic.
I'll go so far as to say this is just a total and complete failure when it comes in giving prisoners the kind of job skills they need to go back out in the free world and function.
The committee says the adult basic education classes should be offered at prisons statewide, not just at the J.F. Ingram facility north of Montgomery and at Atmore near Mobile. Also, it says the two prisons operate at the technical college level, so cost efficiency is lost since the state is paying college-level salaries for basic education classes. One committeeman says there are some instructors paid more than prison wardens. The committee also is very critical of vocational training programs. The committee wants the State Board of Education to have a greater hand in testing and placing students. The committee also wants to see programs redesigned to fit shorter sentences. Now it says the prison system assigns students and often places inmates with a 2-month sentence in a 15-month program. The 27-page report will be turned into the legislature in February when the recommendations will be considered. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
This year's Independence Bowl is being billed as the immovable object, the Virginia Tech defense, against the irresistible force, the Air Force offense. The Falcons, who beat Ole Miss in the '83 Indy Bowl, enter with the nation's second-best rushing attack, while the Hokies boast college football's #2 rushing defense. Air Force isn't expected to pile up their usual 326 yards per game on the ground.
Virginia Tech, plays great defense. They led the country this year, and I don't believe they allowed an average of 71 yards a game. And, they've got an all-American tackle there in Smith, and, they're going to be a formidable opponent, I guarantee you. But I'll never underestimate these players and these kids, and I know they'll go down there and play their hearts out.
The Hokies, making their first bowl appearance since 1980, are led by All-American defensive tackle Bruce Smith. The Outland Trophy winner has recorded 71 tackles behind the line of scrimmage during his career at Tech and anticipates adding to that total Saturday against the Falcons.
They're not going to throw the ball very much, so I have to play against the run, and that's something that I've been concentrating on for the past couple of weeks, and that's something that I plan to do.
I'm Randy Shenning for NBC News.
When the thing started, and I said it last year when I was here, the most important part that free agency meant to me was to give me the opportunity to play for the best possible club I could play for. And not only do I feel like this is a great ball club, but as we said earlier, it just seemed like it would be even more special if we could do it here and get further than we did last year. It's not going to be easy to do what we did last year, but I think we all learned a lot, and hopefully we can come back and get past the point that we were and go on even further to win the World Series.
We're not done yet. We've got a ways to go. Rick has made that commitment to help us go there, and I promised you when I came here we'd get the job done. And I'm tickled to death, baby, I'll tell you that. Ooh. Oh, go for it. All right.
wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Good tidings to you and your kin. Good tidings for Christmas and a Happy New Year. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas. We wish you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Oh, come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. Oh, come ye, oh, come.
Governor Wallace and key legislators on the special committee studying co-employee legislation met this morning at the governor's mansion and agreed the timing is right for a special session.
This co-employee question, I think it was the sincere feeling of every member present today that it's hurting Alabama in the recruitment of industry and bringing jobs into the state of Alabama. And of course, if that be the case, then it's important to Alabamians everywhere, and especially to the 10.5% of our state that do not have a job right now.
Alabama is one of 3 states, including Maryland and Wyoming, whose laws permit employees to sue their employers for simple negligence. Press Secretary Billy Joe Camp says Alabama's current law discourages new businesses from setting up shop here.
When industries start looking at Alabama and some other state, the officials in the other states tell the industry representatives, if you're looking at Alabama or considering them, just go on down there. You'll get sued from the time you get there till the time you leave.
The bill legislators will consider on Monday won't give employers total immunity from negligence lawsuits, as the constitutional amendment defeated by Alabama voters in 1982 would have. Instead, the bill would make it tougher for employees to sue.
The vote before was a constitutional vote which would have just prohibited any lawsuit in this matter whatsoever. This legislation will not do that. It changes the rule of evidence. Makes it more difficult to prove the case, or the circumstances bringing about the injury have to be much more drastic and a willful act to bring it about.
The governor will hold a news conference tomorrow afternoon at 3 o'clock to further explain his position on the upcoming legislation. All legislators are being notified by telegram to be in Montgomery by 6 p.m. on Monday, when the special session will begin. Press Secretary Camp expects the session to last at least 5 days. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
When mothers and fathers quiz their children about what jolly old St. Nick should bring them this Christmas, most kids have lists a mile long. But wouldn't it be much easier for the youngsters to tell Santa face to face? And what about it's better to give than receive? Well, a group of Montgomery youngsters today did both. Students at the River Ridge School and Little Bo Peep Nursery got together this morning to raise money to buy toys for other kids in Birmingham's Children's Hospital. But of course, the best part was sitting on Santa Claus's knee and telling the chubby old man what should be under this year's Christmas tree. And for another group of youngsters, Christmas and Santa Claus came a little early. The Montgomery JCs took 36 kids on a shopping spree. More than $1,500 worth of toys and gifts were purchased.
This is just part of our community development program where we go out and into the community and use some of the money that we raised, like for instance at the haunted house. We use that money for this project and just to help the community, give the community back what they've given us, the JCs.
Afterwards, the kids were treated to lunch, and then old St. Nick put in a surprise appearance, giving the kids a chance to ask for anything they might have forgotten.
A bag? Okay, what else?
lot of surprise. You like games to play? Huh? Gonna be a good boy. Gonna study hard in school. Mind the teacher. She didn't have to fuss at you, do you? Okay, you be a good boy.
What do you think your favorite part is? My favorite part, well, is just watching the kids not buy stuff for themselves, but buy stuff for their parents or their sisters or somebody else in the family.
Dean Argo, WSFA TV News.
This building is a refuge, a shelter for stray animals. Down this corridor are the victims of owners who no longer want them, animals who have been abandoned and left to the mercy of the outdoors. Some animals are lucky to end up here, but others aren't so fortunate. They don't make it at all. Animal Control Officer Clarence Sanders says there's a growing number of stray animals in the county. He says they've been abandoned because people don't want to pay a $12 fine for not having their pets vaccinated against rabies.
Their line of thinking is, well, if I dump them out there, at least maybe somebody will pick them up and they have a chance to live, whereby if they're taken to the animal shelter, they don't have a chance to live, that they will be put to sleep. But that's not true because so many animals are adopted at the animal shelter.
Sanders says 2 new control officers have been hired to help with the increasing number of strays.
Well, this backlog of calls, one man just can't take care of it. So many calls coming in, and we just had to have another truck and another temporary man. And that probably won't be enough for a while, but at least maybe we can kind of catch up with the calls.
Sanders says taking a pet to an animal shelter is free and much more humane than leaving them alone, often to their deaths. Christy Steves, WSFA TV News, Houston County.
Two head coaches that have not had the best of seasons, Saints and Coach Bum Phillips winning their 7th and final game of the season. Second and goal in the first quarter, Dave Wilson of the Saints to a wide-open Hokie Gaijon for a 2-yard touchdown. The Saints led 7-0. The Giants scored an apparent touchdown on their next possession, Joe Morris going in to be called back on a Giants holding penalty. New York was forced to settle for 3 when former Auburn star Frank Warren sacked Giants quarterback Phil Simms. Ali Haji Sheikh's 32-yard effort was good. The only points for the Giants today, Saints led 7-3. All-Pro linebacker Lawrence Taylor for New York. With his team behind, a tremendous block. Cornerback Perry Williams intercepts the Wilson pass. Taylor promptly levels the Saints receiver. New Orleans adds a field goal in the second half to beat the Giants 10-3.
Police say Porter travels the interstates, making a habit of robbing and raping. He's suspected in a number of unsolved cases in Tennessee, Florida, and Georgia. But Alabama was his undoing. Porter's been staying here at the Southside Hotel just off the interstate. Employees say he'd been here all week and they'd seen him in the restaurant and in the bar, but they had no idea he was a fugitive. He was registered under the name of Gary Hall. Friday night, investigators teamed up, checking all the hotels along the interstate, and they got lucky. They heard that a man fitting Porter's description took a cab to this East Side lounge. The tip was good. Undercover officers moved in and made their arrest.
Possession is ours right now. We have him, and he'll be tried here. Of course, we welcome any of the other jurisdictions to come in to interview him for possible prosecution of their jurisdictions, but right now he's in Montgomery City Jail, and he'll be held here and tried in Alabama prior to being released to other jurisdictions.
In Porter's hotel room, investigators found the pillowcase he allegedly used as a mask during the rapes and a coat belonging to one of the victims. Porter's charged with 1 count of robbery and burglary and 2 counts of rape and sodomy. He's being held in the Montgomery City Jail without bond and with 20 holds from other jurisdictions. Gina Gregory, WSFA TV News.
I got to get back there by 2, so I thought I'd take the St. John's. So I thought I'd make it quick.
Fringes and you don't even know what's going on. I know. I've been shocked. I finally learned to explain it to other people.
Governor Wallace, Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley, and the 4 legislators who drafted the co-employee lawsuit package hope it has something for everyone: the working man, big business, and the trial lawyers. Wallace considers the co-employee bill to be the most important part of the package. The bill would make it more difficult for workers to sue co-employees for job-related injuries, and Wallace says companies are threatening to overlook Alabama unless the bill is passed.
We also have a paper here from the International Paper Company that came out not long ago. It goes all over the country that in effect says you don't want to go to Alabama with your industry. Now, when we have things like that going on, this is a need for an emergency situation because there are many industries that are looking at Alabama, but they don't like this co-employee bill.
While industry is backing the co-employee bill, Wallace hopes labor will be pleased with their slice of the pie, a beefed-up workmen's compensation plan.
In fact, it's going to raise the benefits of the working man. It's going to, I believe, about 30% up the workmen's compensation benefits. It's going to also up the death benefits by about 1/3. It's going to help the working man also by, instead of limiting him to a certain amount of time, if he's totally disabled, he can draw benefits for the rest of his life.
Meanwhile, trial lawyers who have opposed efforts to rewrite the current co-employee law, saying it provides a safeguard for Alabama workers, may support 3 bills pertaining to the judiciary. The first would remove the statute of limitations on rape and certain sex crimes. The second would extend the statute from 1 to 2 years in civil cases, and the third would provide for non-unanimous jury verdicts in civil cases where both parties agreed. Lieutenant Governor Baxley says he expects either the whole package of bills will pass or none will, and he expects all to pass within 5 days. The session begins tonight at 6. Lisa Walsh, WSFA TV News.
Many of the lawmakers aren't happy to be in Montgomery a week before Christmas, and still others aren't happy that so little has been revealed about this latest version of the co-employee law. The first details of the changes were discussed briefly this afternoon, changes aimed at offering something to each of the 3 major forces affected: business, labor, and trial lawyers. For business, the idea is to make it harder to win a lawsuit against them. The The proposed law would do that by requiring the worker to prove the injury happened due to willful intent rather than the current simple negligence. This would cut down on the number of lawsuits by an estimated 95 to 98% and would put Alabama in line with 29 other states with similar laws. For labor, 4 major changes are offered to the workman's compensation law. The weekly benefits would be bumped from the current maximum of $194 to $291. And the current cap of 300 weeks' worth of benefits would be removed, allowing benefits to be paid indefinitely for the duration of the illness. The automatic death benefit would be increased from the current maximum of $97,000 to the proposed maximum of $145,500. And the surviving spouse would be allowed to sue the company, an option now prohibited. These changes would put Alabama's workman's comp the best in the Southeast and would reportedly only cost Alabama employers 5% more than they're currently paying. For trial lawyers, 2 bills are offered, one changing the statute of limitations for any civil suit from the current 1 year to the proposed 2 years. The second bill ends the requirement for unanimous jury decisions and allows for a 9-3 split decision if the lawyers agree beforehand to accept such a split decision. For the various factions, tonight will be spent digesting the complex implication of the changes, and the first round of reaction can be measured tomorrow when the bill comes up for House committee debate. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
This is the 19th year of the Montgomery Academy Christmas Tournament. The host team has won this event at least a half-dozen times. This year, Montgomery Academy opened first-round play against Alabama Christian, the winner in 1982. Coach Ronnie Sewell's Alabama Christian Eagles had won 5 of their first 9 games. And when Sherrod Bale drove to the basket here, Alabama Christian had tied this game at 8. Later, after a Montgomery Academy miss, Harvey Crosby passed ahead to Trey Tew here, and Alabama Christian enjoyed a 10-8 lead. But Jody Bear fired up the Montgomery Academy Eagles with 3 quick baskets, and the Eagles reeled off 18 of the next 28 points in the first half. Coach Bill Hill's squad, only 1-4 coming in, was up 26-18 at the half.
They've heard about you because they just collapsing on you. That's smart. Now you get down on the base.
Bear continued his hot shooting in the second half and finished with a game-high 20 points. Dave Avant tossed in 12 for Montgomery Academy, and Chandler Etheridge pulled down 18 rebounds as the Eagles whipped Alabama Christian 53-37 and advanced to meet either Trinity or Catholic in the championship game tomorrow night at 8.
A pretty good method of operation. I'll tell you another reason why we have never been able to catch anybody during
When the generator blew, we always had to send someone down here to pick them up like salvation.
Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much, Governor.
And I'll turn it over to Al Childs.
Thank you, sir. And thank all of you. I think we probably need to adjourn outside. And for those of you who are
getting it up to the floor.
That's one of the problem, getting it up full votes.
Yes, sir. And once we get it up, though, both houses will respond accordingly.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you a lot.
Seconds left.
Having waited this long, I'll wait to 22 seconds.
I'll pass that comment.
Multiple copies of certificate saying. Any other nominations?
Thank you, sir.
6 copies and the ballots. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All date in the presence of all this company.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, those who wish to fill out the other form.
Thank you very much.
The passing of the report from the task force to the governor represents the end of nearly a year and a half of study for the 41 committee members and the beginning of new battles to implement the recommendations. While the report outlines 14 proposals, committee chairman Dr. Russ Fine views them all as a single solution to reducing DUI accidents and deaths in the state.
We believe that in order to achieve the kind of effect that we know can be achieved, the kind of effect that we seek, that all 14 recommendations ought to be implemented at the same time.
Some of the specific recommendations in the report include raising the legal drinking age to 21, giving lawmen the authority to take blood and urine tests, reestablish and upgrade driver's education and substance abuse programs in public and private schools, make restitution to victims part of a DUI offender's sentence, and enact legislation requiring the use of seat belts. Committee members say the majority of the recommendations, like increasing public information about DUI and setting up statewide alcohol and drug rehabilitation programs, don't require legislation, but can be done through state agencies.
We've actually specified the particular state agencies that ought to become involved. In essence, we've tried to leave nothing for chance.
The governor will now sit down with his advisors and determine the best way to implement the recommendations he feels the state needs. Committee officials say they feel good about the governor's and the public's involvement.
There is, in fact, interest from the public in doing something substantive about the drunk driving problem that we have in Alabama.
Dr. Fine says the report, if implemented, won't mean an end to drunk driving in Alabama, but could mean a large reduction in what the committee says is a problem that has exceeded epidemic proportions. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
That's the other charge.
Major John Wilson says word is just now getting around that Porter is in custody, and he expects other police departments to press charges.
We know of at least 5 that are looking for this individual, and we feel like there's probably going to be more because even with the charges that we have thus far, we're expecting numerous more charges.
He says Porter's arrest is the result of teamwork between law enforcement agencies and quick thinking by the Montgomery Police Department.
We requested additional information. The teletype came in early Friday. Immediately we went by way of the media to the public with this information, and our investigators on foot went door to door to every motel and nightclub they could find. One of the clerks at a local motel identified the subject and stated that he had taken a cab to another local nightclub. We followed up on this information, identified the subject in the nightclub, and made our arrest there.
Porter is charged with burglary, robbery, rape, and sodomy, and Wilson says he's suspected in the rape and robbery of a woman in McGee Estates last week. Porter is facing at least 19 similar charges in other states, but he'll probably go to court in Alabama before he goes anywhere else. Terry Stanton, WSFA TV News.
For business, the idea is to make it harder to win a lawsuit against them. The proposed law would do that by requiring the worker to prove the injury happened due to willful intent rather than the current simple negligence. This would cut down on the number of lawsuits by an estimated 95 to 98% and would put Alabama in line with 29 other states with similar laws. For labor, 4 major changes are offered to the workman's compensation law. The weekly benefits would be bumped from the current maximum of $194 to $291. and the current cap of 300 weeks' worth of benefits would be removed, allowing benefits to be paid indefinitely for the duration of the illness. The automatic death benefit would be increased from the current maximum of $97,000 to the proposed maximum of $145,500. And the surviving spouse would be allowed to sue the company, an option now prohibited. These changes would put Alabama's workman's comp the best in the Southeast and would reportedly only cost Alabama employers 5% more than they're currently paying. For trial lawyers, 2 bills are offered, one changing the statute of limitations for any civil suit from the current 1 year to the proposed 2 years. The second bill ends the requirement for unanimous jury decisions and allows for a 9-3 split decision if the lawyers agree beforehand to accept such a split decision.
Oh, well, this is a time for some of the people that weren't that well known, or some more well known people, to show their talents. And you know, everybody's looking forward to it. I know I am, and you know, it's going to be a lot of fun playing in front of a hometown crowd, you know, being from Montgomery and all.
What are your thoughts as you approach this game?
I'm just going to go out and try to have some fun. It's always an honor to be selected for an All-Star game, and you know, mingling with the scouts and the different players. I'm just going to go out and have some fun and get to know a lot of the guys that's here.
I think Auburn is a very physical team. They have won. They've been consistently good. Pat Dye went in there and just did a tremendous job immediately. They were, by many people, thought that they were as close to being #1 in the country as there was last year, even though Miami won the vote. So, I mean, they were up there in 1, 2, or 3 always. Preseason-wise, they were the same. Of course, you take an athlete of the stature of Bo Jackson, you take him out of your program for a long period of time. They still went on and won 8 games without him. And then when he got back here, of course, all he is an extra added addition now. But he is just such a dominant player. But he is not all of Auburn. Auburn is just a collection of good, fine athletes that are well coached, playing the tough Southeastern Conference. And I know they'll play a very hard physical game, and it'll be a different style attack attacking each other today.
Donald Robinson, owner of the Friendly Cafe, asked Montgomery City Council members to listen with an open mind to what he had to say. He is the same man who was arrested last week for allegedly threatening to blow up the police station if he couldn't talk to the mayor. Robinson told the council that what he did was bad, but he says that the police had been harassing him and his business.
What I've done, I know that it's bad. I know that I'm facing a big jail term. But man, in my predicament, I felt that I had been mistreated by the city police department, and I proved that I was.
After asking the council to consider renewing his liquor license next month, Robinson left quietly. Oddly enough, the police officer who subdued Robinson last week, Sergeant Stan Ingram, was named Officer of the Quarter at the meeting and commended for the way he handled the incident. Susan Silvernail, WSFA TV News.
Did just exactly what was said. You had others with you, but you would appoint, man, this letter and this check.
To state that this is a hearing on the licensing and control regulations and to provide penalties for the violations of the regulations.
The proposal as set forth here with a 1,000-foot limitation is simply an extension of prohibition in our local area, and it will not work. And I say to you, let's have something more reasonable, because if we don't, what we're going to have is something that concerns me very much. We're going to have some legal action.
The 1,000-foot limitation, if tried in litigation and if defeated, would place us in a position where there will be no protection, if I understand this ordinance correctly, for churches from having places to pop up on closer than that. We desire that protection as a church.
All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
And your cost of licensing, the methods make it would cost approximately $1,700. Now, why do you have a bond? I just don't understand it.
Have a motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? I oppose.
The influence of Governor Wallace and the conservative business groups was clear as the House Judiciary Committee overwhelmingly approved the bills, making it harder to sue a business for job-related injuries and beefing up the workmen's compensation benefits. The implication by the administration that all sides had worked together to draft the bill was dropped today.
We haven't had an endorsement of this bill out of any of the three groups. There is no agreement.
And Labor made it clear it wasn't included and doesn't like the latest version.
But in reality, what you're going to do is that you're going to give industry the biggest Christmas present that they've had in their life, because this is nothing but an industry bill.
Labor thinks the restrictions on lawsuits is too limiting. Labor also thinks the workmen's compensation benefit changes won't pay more for most lower-income workers, won't drastically improve death benefits, and doesn't do anything to improve the administration of workers' compensation claims.
Despite the opposition by Labor and the trial lawyers, many feel the Wallace administration influence will work again tomorrow when the bill is considered by the House. The opposition is holding its greatest efforts for the Senate, where it says it has cautious optimism that it can stop the bill. But the Senate's record of 6 months ago at killing the bill may have been effectively weakened when Lieutenant Governor Bill Baxley, a trial lawyer himself, said he too is in favor of the bill. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
In a sister city or a university rather, relationship where the two universities and elsewhere around the globe. It was hard work. We did, however, want the whole world to know that the World Conference of Mayors does not approve of racism or apartheid or any form which deprives human beings of anything less than their full human and civil rights. And so while we did not direct our message to any particular to the People's Republic of China and of course the United States of America, we expanded our board where we now have a total of 13 countries.
Hold that right there. All right. Go way behind you.
The TV cameras, they listen in that TV coverage. They want some of y'all.
Good to be with y'all. Governor, thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good to see you folks.
Good to see you again. It's been a long That's true.
When the Germans launched their last major offensive of World War II, it caught the Allied Army by surprise. 8,000 troops were taken prisoner, and 18,000 troops were trapped in Bastogne, Belgium, cut off from their supplies. The Allied High Command knew it needed to get supplies to the area in a hurry, and the only way to do it was by gliders. State Senator Earl Goodwin from Selma was one of the pilots scheduled to fly supplies to the troops, but Mother Nature intervened.
We had been alerted to take medical supplies into Bastogne, and we were stationed in England. But the weather was so bad that the planes could not cross the channel.
While Goodwin didn't make the flight, other glider pilots stationed in France did.
They just let us know how bad the supplies were needed, and it was going to be mighty important that we do have a successful mission if it's any way at all possible, because I think medical supplies, as low as they were on arms, they were still lower on medical supplies, and they had such tremendous casualties there that they needed supplies bad.
Out of the 50 pilots sent on the rescue mission, 35 made it to Bastogne with more than 106,000 pounds of supplies and a medical team. It was those supplies that sustained the troops until an armored column penetrated the German defenses and again opened up supply lines. Don Phelps, WSFA TV News.
Auburn and Arkansas have a lot more in common than just the A in front of their name. Both teams run the wishbone, Auburn for 257 yards rushing a game, Arkansas for 220 yards. Each has a big play passing threat. Each team has averaged 153 yards a game through the air. And both teams have taken an indirect route to get to Memphis.
Liberty Bowl extended us the opportunity to come. We were still playing for the Cotton Bowl. We thought we had the best of both worlds. If we could make the Cotton Bowl and the Southwest Conference Championship, that's our #1 goal.
Don't let Ken Hatfield mislead you. Arkansas is mighty glad to be in Memphis, where the red and white will outnumber the orange and blue 4-1.
Kind of like SMU, they can do all three things. You know, they're big, strong, and they can run too. So, you know, it's going to be one of the best challenges for us of playing Auburn. They're a great football team, and it's going to be a good thing for University of Arkansas to play a team like Auburn to build on in the future, and especially playing them in a bowl game will be another plus.
This may look like a normal airplane, but it's not. This is an aerobatic airplane, flown in air shows around the country. What's special about it is its fuel, 100% alcohol. The plane is flown by Dr. Max Schock, a Baylor University professor and a nationally known pilot. He started flying with alcohol in the mid-70s during the Arab oil embargo.
I started looking around for an alternate fuel, and really have been quite surprised how successful alcohol is. It's not only an alternate fuel, alcohol is really a superior fuel to gasoline. There's no question about it.
Officials at the Alabama Aviation and Technical College say the Ozark School is the only one they know of testing alcohol aviation fuel. They say this type of fuel could easily be produced here in Alabama.
When you use ethanol, that fuel comes from wheat, soybean, corn, grain, and sugar cane. So every gallon you use of ethanol helps the farmers. That's the agricultural end of the state. Now, the methanol comes from coal and wood. We got plenty of that in Alabama, too.
Cal Calloway, WSFA TV News, Ozark.
Law saying that the only way that you can tax cigarettes is either by a millage levied on each cigarette.
Well, let's maybe sign it.
We don't have to put that in here, do we?
No, sir. Okay. All opposed, nay? And it's unanimous. Have resolution 7825. Who would take it off? Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Hourly fees and expenses as required.
I move, it's the same. Yes,
We make quality of life in the city of Dublin and the surrounding areas better, and this is one of those.
Approved over halfway into the year. You know, it took us that long to get things consummated. So we did not have adequate time.
They were in town, and he was very, very complimentary.
This is established that day. This is authorized.